Two high-profile controversies headlined by two prominent political figures have thrust the role of executive authority on municipal procurement into the spotlight. Former eThekwini Mayor Zandile Gumede was in court earlier today where she pleaded not guilty to charges of fraud and corruption, money laundering and racketeering, totaling some 320 million rands during her tenure, while Tshwane Metro's Mayor Randall Williams came for serious political drubbing over a 26 billion rand unsolicited, he says, investment proposal for a leasing of land there where the substations are. Well, joining us now to discuss the impact of executive interference in municipal compliance with procurement legislation is researcher and policy analyst Nkosikhulule Nyembezi. Good evening and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight here on In Focus. So I've just mentioned two, of course, there are various others. I mean, Joburg is also facing its own issues around what the mayor can do and cannot do, or what decisions the mayors who hold executive power can be involved in. How bad is this question of executive overreach in our municipalities?
Oh, it is bad. It is very serious. We see it all the time in terms of the Auditor General reports, where we see that several municipalities are unable to account for the expenditure, and they are unable to provide sufficient documents to support the audit. And as a result, the wasteful expenditure that keeps rising speaks to this deficiency in terms of how politicians interfere with the officials that are supposed to be accounting officers, and that is what needs to be put to a stop.
Yeah. Is it a case of officials being politicized that leads to these kind of challenges? Because, I mean, the new bill seems to be dealing with that, saying, no, officials, you can't be holding political office. But, of course, you're not dealing with the bigger issue here, which is the executive power that interferes with the work that the officials are doing. So some of my question is, by depoliticizing, so to speak, officials, does that necessarily help the kind of challenge that we're dealing with?
It does help. In fact, the focal point is the professionalization of the local government sphere of government. Because we know now that a number of people who are employed to do these highly skilled, highly technical jobs, they do not have the sufficient skills to do that. They are there because of cadre deployment. And a lot of them are corrupt because you see that they mismanage funds in one municipality, and then a few months down the line they emerge in another municipality without having been sanctioned for doing that. So the more we get closer to the professionalization of the sector, the better we'll be able to ensure that there is this separation of roles between politicians and appointed officials.
There seems to be I don't know, maybe a deliberate blurring of the lines or a deliberate misunderstanding as to what is a strategic role of an executive as compared to the operational role that officials need to play. For example, where a mayor says, no, as a strategic role, as a policy, for example, on climate change, a climate change plan, we've decided that a power station is no longer going to be refurbished because we are moving away from coal. Is that within the powers of the mayor to make that call? And where do we draw the line between that and how that particular decision is going to be implemented operationally?
Yes, it is within the powers of the mayor or the elected representatives. Remember how the system works is that in council, the plans for the year are tabled and the council will approve that together with the budget that must be spent to operationalize all of that. What becomes problematic is when the elected representatives interfere with the expenditure pattern and what has been adopted by council, just because they want that tender to go to their friends and just because they want to appoint somebody who's going to be loyal to them. So that is when the problem comes in. And we have seen that because the officials do not get a full tenure, they are appointed on 5-year contract, and most of the time they will not finish that 5 year. They will jump over to greener pastures because they are not sure if that contract is going to be renewed. And also because we are coming from elections, like you'll find that the officials who have been there, the elected representatives will want to appoint their own people, and they elbow out the officials. We see the case of the Nelson Mandela Metro, where there are now 2 municipal managers running parallel structures and all of that. So yes, this bill is likely to help us to professionalize the service.
And while you speak of that kind of situation, I mean, is the coalition arrangement in itself not going to lead to such a situation where much of the appointments, particularly the selection processes, are going to be politicized?
No, it's not supposed to. But as it stands now, it is doing that. So the bill that is coming to place is supposed to put that to a stop, to say, do not interfere as elected representatives. Do not interfere with the recruitment. Do not be part of a panel that appoints people, and so on. And also for the appointed officials to know that they cannot hide behind a political party to say, I'm taking instructions from my principal. They must know now that they will be held personally liable for contravening the Public Finance Act. You will know that there is a strict regime as to how to spend public finances, and that is what needs to be complied with. That is what they have not been complying with. Year after year, even after the Auditor General has been shepherding them onto the correct direction to say you need to have a skilled set of people to manage your finances, strict internal audits, so that you can graduate into a situation where you have unqualified reports. Unfortunately, we have seen a recession in terms of the quality of audits and the amount that is being wasted.
Yeah. Are you saying this will do away with that? Because coalition arrangements themselves are a political arrangement. Some of these agreements we actually never get a sight of. In fact, I don't think we've ever seen one. What actually these parties promise one another, right? You would hear that, no, this one was promised this particular SOE or this agency within the municipality for the support that they get in council. So this is where the lines become blurred, where then you will see that particular recruitment processes would be directed towards that coalition agreement.
I think that the coalitions are the way to go because people want more accountability. And the more voices you have in the council, the better the service delivery processes, the better the attention to the needs of the citizens instead of going for elephant projects, for pet projects and the likes. But what we still need is actually coalitions that are moving away from political parties, because South Africans are seeing now that political parties are more of a liability to our democracy. Hence now there's also a talk about opening space for independent candidates to contest at provincial and national level. So the sooner the political parties sort out their house, and the sooner the citizens put more of their trust on individual citizens without political party affiliation, the better are the prospects of the country. Because we see also in Nelson Mandela Bay, those small parties that are coming together that are key kingmakers, we also see that the individuals put forward are suspended day in and day out by their parties. There is quarreling, there is instability. So the main problem seems to be political parties at this stage. Hence, there needs to be a move towards independent candidates.
The move towards this particular framework is also said to be good for stability, particularly when it comes to service delivery, because changing guard of the executive would not necessarily then result in the changing of those in administration. You're saying this is a good thing?
It is a good thing. It stipulates the qualifications that an official needs to have, the candidates for specific positions, and it also gives powers to the member of the Executive Council, the MEC, to issue declaratory orders and say, no, the person you've appointed does not meet the minimum qualifications or the experience required. And as such, to have those checks and balances becomes essential, because we have seen what we call a walkover by councillors in terms of how they appoint people, particularly when it comes to this issue of recycling people who have been found guilty of maladministration and corruption in one municipality, and we see them emerging in another municipality because of cadre deployment. So to the extent that there are clear powers in terms of ensuring that what is proposed in the legislation is implemented, it gives hope that come next elections, we will see 2 or 3 more steps towards professionalization, and that should be a good thing for the overall service delivery.
So, Mr. Nyembezi, are you saying then this legislation, combined with other accountability measures like the PFMA and so on and so forth, would make for a situation where there is less executive interference, particularly when it comes to critical financial decisions and appointments that have got to be made in our municipalities?
Yes, because interference will be against the law, and this law is filling in a vacuum. So what has happened is that politicians have capitalized on the vacuum that existed to do things willy-nilly, even against the advice of the Auditor General in terms of how money should be spent. So now that this legislation is in place and it sets out timelines to say if you are an official for a political party, you have 12 months within which to resign that position. And anybody else who coming in, interviewed and appointed, the council must satisfy themselves that they are not political, they do not have political office. So all those checks and balances seem to be strong. There will be grounds for litigating in case where there is a transgression. And I think there will be some form of self-selection and self-normalization even in terms of candidates who apply for a position and they are not appointed. They can contest on the basis that the decision was not taken in accordance with this legislation. So there are areas for enforcement from all angles. That is what gives confidence to say this legislation is going to work.
Mr. Nyembezi, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight here on In Focus. That is researcher and policy analyst Nkosikhulule Nyembezi.